So, if you're like a lot of us, you've probably been thinking quite a bit about AI recently.
Mm-hmm. It's hard not to.
And for many people, that thought it pretty quickly turns towards panic. Maybe not Skynet panic, but definitely about, what's going to happen to our jobs.
Right. The economic disruption.
Exactly. Even if we figure out all the safety stuff, AI is still likely to displace a huge number of workers, maybe even us.
Yeah, that hits close to home for a lot of professions.
It does. And our source material for this deep dive, it features a columnist who's really open about that. She worries about AI writing competent prose, her words, and potentially making her own job,
Right.
unprofitable.
And she shares that really personal story, doesn't she, about choosing journalism.
Yeah, from about 20 years back, she had this very expensive MBA, but chose journalism instead. And when someone asked her why, she said, look, she only had so much time on this planet, and she wanted to spend it doing something that matters. And also, crucially, something I really, really, really love to do. Which, I mean, that resonates, doesn't it?
It really does. But here's the fascinating twist. Despite those very real fears lots of us probably share,
Uh-huh.
she argues pretty strongly that we shouldn't actually try to stop this progress. And that's where this deep dive gets interesting. She makes this surprising connection to, of all people, the 19th century Luddites.
So Luddites, okay, that is unexpected, given her own fears about AI taking her job.
Exactly. And she argues we have this profound obligation to the future.
So that's what we're going to explore in this deep dive then. We're going to unpack that connection, her personal anxiety, the Luddites, and this idea of future obligation. It's all drawn from her piece, The Unseen Gifts of Tomorrow, A Luddite's Redemption.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's start with the Luddites themselves. Because, when we hear Luddite today, we usually picture someone who just hates all technology, like a total technophobe.
Yeah, that's the common image. But our source says, hang on, their story is a lot more complicated than that.
Right. So who were they really?
Well, they were skilled artisans, highly skilled, actually. They made handcrafted textiles, which back then, that was the standard. That was high-quality stuff.
Okay. So specialists.
Exactly. Their whole livelihood, their whole way of life, it was tied up in that craft.
Yeah.
And then, boom, the Industrial Revolution arrives.
Right. Enter the machines.
Enter the machines. You get things like spinning jennies, you get these mechanized mill owners, and this new tech could make textiles way, way cheaper.
Undercutting the artisans completely.
Totally. It was an existential threat. So their response, destroying machines, I mean, yes, it was violent, but you can see it came from desperation. Their jobs, their communities, everything was on the line.
And our source, the columnist, she actually feels some sympathy for them now, looking back.
She does. She admits finding herself having this kind of modern-day sympathy for what they went through, which is interesting given her background.
It is interesting because she describes herself as a libertarian columnist, someone who believes in progress and creative destruction. So how does she square that belief with sympathizing with the Luddites, who actively tried to stop progress? That seems like a real contradiction.
It does. And that's where she forces us to look at something maybe uncomfortable, this idea of progress we celebrate.
Right.
Well, it's not a smooth, painless journey. It comes with a price tag, a big one, often.
Okay.
She puts it really bluntly. We libertarians like to talk about the glories of freedom and progress, and they are glorious, but they are not free. That's her core point. Progress has real costs.
And people get hurt.
Yes. She says sometimes people get hurt, often lots of people. And she gives historical examples from her piece, like the printing press, amazing, right?
Yeah.
Democratized knowledge, sparked the Renaissance, but it also played a role in things like witch burnings and wars of religion, or the Industrial Revolution eventually raised living standards massively, but initially.
Grim factories, pollution.
Exactly. Grim factory jobs, squalid urban living conditions, and choking pollution. And she makes this point that while, okay, modern governments can allay many of those costs now.
Right. We have safety nets, environmental regulations, things like that.
We do. But, she argues, governments can't give people back the life they had, the community, the skills, the identity that was lost.
Mm-hmm. That's a deep loss.
It is. And so she stresses we have this obligation to count those costs, to acknowledge the pain. Because, as she puts it, telling someone your fears are stupid, well, no one was ever persuaded by that approach.
That makes sense. You have to acknowledge the reality of the disruption for people. But, okay, if the costs are that real and sometimes that devastating, how does she then argue that we should still push forward? Why bear those costs?
This is where she makes that big philosophical leap you mentioned. She basically argues that we, living today, are the massive beneficiaries of previous decisions to prioritize future growth over protecting the present.
Huh. Beneficiaries?
Yeah. Think about our lives now. Compared to most of human history, we live in incredible comfort and safety. The normal condition of humanity, she writes, was constant worry about food, shelter, warmth.
Basic survival.
Basic survival. Or things like having to bury a child who died of diarrhea before its first birthday. Horrific things that were commonplace.
Right. We forget how recent our relative comfort is.
We really do. And she says we escape those worries mostly through massive chronological luck. Not because we're inherently better or smarter,
Yeah.
just born at the right time.
An unearned inheritance, she calls it.
Precisely. A precious and totally unearned inheritance. And because of that luck, because we received this gift from the past, we have an obligation to pay that forward.
Ah, okay. So we owe it to the future.
We owe it to the future. We need to leave an even bigger legacy for our descendants. So from that perspective, actively trying to halt progress, well, she calls it a kind of theft.
It's a theft. That's strong.
Yeah. Stealing from the future is how she puts it.
Wow. Okay, that reframes it completely. It makes you think, what if past generations hadn't paid it forward? What if the Luddites, say, had actually succeeded? What would our world look like?
Yeah, she runs that exact thought experiment. And it's pretty sobering. If they'd managed to stop industrialization back then, she says, effectively, they'd have been reaching forward in time and taking almost everything we have in order to enrich themselves.
Taking from us.
Taking from us. Imagine, she says, a spinner sells a few spools of thread and suddenly you don't have a car.
Whoa.
Or a weaver sells a hand-loom cloak and whoops, there go your refrigerator, your central heating, and your college education.
Okay, yeah, that paints a picture.
And maybe the most chilling one, a whole suit of clothes and thousands of kids just died of preventable disease because the wealth and technology to prevent those diseases wouldn't exist.
Right. The knock-on effects are huge.
Enormous.
Oh,
So her question becomes, when you feel that urge to stop innovation because it threatens your job, you have to ask, how much am I willing to steal from my grandkids? I mean, from everyone's grandkids.
that's a heavy question. Stealing from the future. But I can hear the counter-argument, right? People might say, oh, okay, fine, but we have it pretty good now. We've got airplanes, mRNA vaccines, HBO. Haven't we progressed enough? Does she tackle that?
She does. She anticipates that exact point. Her response is basically, a Luddite in the 19th century would have said the exact same thing about their world. They had things previous generations couldn't dream of.
They couldn't imagine our world.
Not even close. They couldn't imagine a future where, the average person lives better, longer, healthier lives than literal royalty did back then.
That's true. And what about the downsides of our progress, like climate change?
Right. She addresses concerns like global warming and endangered species, too.
Yeah.
People asking, is all this progress really all that great if it leads to these massive problems?
It's a fair question.
A very fair question. She acknowledges it,
Yeah.
but then she connects the dots. The Industrial Revolution, yes, it contributed massively to climate change, but it also created the immense wealth.
That allows us to try and fix it.
Exactly. Wealth that allowed us to divert millions of workers from agriculture and weaving into science and medicine, the very fields that give us the tools to fight ecological disaster.
So the problem and the potential solution grew together, in a way.
In a complex, unforeseen way. Her key insight here is, we couldn't have predicted any of that from the outset. We kind of had to live the change in order to understand what it meant.
That really resonates. She says the near-term downsides are often quite easy to picture. You read an article about AI taking jobs, and the fear is immediate, tangible.
Right there in front of you.
But the long-term upside, she argues, that's much harder to grasp. Why? Because progress is cumulative, and the longer it accumulates, the weirder it gets.
Weirder and often more wonderful in ways you just can't foresee. Which leads to her final, really mind-bending thought experiment.
Okay, what is it?
She says, imagine trying to explain your life right now to a Luddite.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And not just the obvious stuff like, cars or airplanes. Not even just indoor plumbing, which is extremely awesome, as she notes.
Haha, yes, indoor plumbing is awesome.
But think about the concepts. Things like mass post-secondary education, or the BBC,
Yeah.
or nursing homes, or bachelorette weekends.
Bachelorette weekends. How would you even start?
Right. Or just the idea of weekends themselves. Or standardized time.
Yeah.
or suburbs and pizza delivery. Our whole social structure is built on layers of innovation they couldn't possibly conceive of.
It's true. Try explaining streaming services or, I don't know, social media influencers. They think we were completely mad.
Totally mad. We're living in what would seem like a fairy tale to them.
She actually uses that word, doesn't she? Fairy tale.
She does. She paints this picture. Imagine a nation so rich that when a pandemic strikes, people can afford to wait that out at home while scientists rush out a magic shot that helps keep people from dying.
Which is basically what happened for many people recently.
It is. And she says, to a Luddite, that would have sounded like a fairy tale. And he'd be right. We are living in fairyland, and indeed, we all have magic wands in our pockets, referring to smartphones.
Magic wands in our pockets. That's a powerful image for how far we've
It
come.
really is. And the Luddite, listening to all this, would just be baffled, right? Thinking, but how? How could a spinning Jenny possibly lead to
Yeah.
all that?
Yeah, what's the connection?
And the answer she gives is, it wasn't just the spinning Jenny. It wasn't one thing. It was this unprecedented wave of innovation after innovation after innovation.
A cumulative effect over centuries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And crucially, many of those individual innovations did put people out of good jobs, just like AI might do now. That pain was real.
But the collective result.
The collective result is, well, us being able to have this conversation, you listening right now, rather than, as she vividly puts it, huddled by a smoky fire knitting stockings to sell.
Mm.
Yeah. And she notes those early innovators, the mill owners, maybe they were just looking for profit, just trying to make a buck. But in the grand scheme of things, we're the ones who profited the most, us, the descendants.
So this whole argument brings her right back around to her own situation. Her personal fear about AI disrupting her career, a career she loves, one she spent more than 20 years building.
Right. And she admits there are moments she wishes she could stop this thing, or at least slow it down a little. That fear is real for her.
So this deep dive has really illuminated this core tension, hasn't it? The very real, often immediate, painful costs of progress felt by individuals, by communities.
The disruptions, the losses.
Versus these almost unimaginable cumulative gifts that we inherit from past progress, these things we just take for granted, and then this challenging idea of our obligation to keep that going for the future.
Yeah, that obligation is the crux of it. And the central, really difficult idea she leaves us wrestling with is her own conclusion, her own resolve, despite her fears.
What does she finally land on?
She reminds herself, basically, that she has no right to steal the future from our descendants, because I'm already living in someone else's future. And it is literally better than they could have imagined.
Wow, living in someone else's future. That's quite a thought to end on. It's a powerful way to frame our current moment with AI and everything else changing so fast.
It really is. It forces you to acknowledge the incredible inheritance we have and our role, maybe our duty, in that ongoing story.
So it leaves a question for all of us, really. As technology keeps racing forward, how do you weigh those costs, the ones you can see and feel right now, against those unseen, maybe unimaginable wonders you might be preserving for generations still to come?